actually three major situations going on in the market. Now, this is not a market show, so we're not going to get into it too badly, or too much, I should say. There is another show that's very good about that called not Digital Drive, that's what you're listening to now, called Nuganomics.com with David Toulis, where he talks about the markets, and he's probably already got an edge on me when it comes to the markets. However, there have been three situations, really two main ones, that really have not been covered at all in the cable news or anything like that. You've probably heard about Greece a little bit, but chances are you haven't heard much of anything about Puerto Rico, which is another situation economically that's going on. Nobody wants to talk about that for some reason, and so I see it as my holy duty to do so. I am news director here at Hot News Talk Radio, and as such, it sort of takes a precedence, I guess, over the hosting part. Because if something is really important, like what we have here, I kind of have to talk about it because it's important, and it's not quite right for the news at 5, where we have Hot News Live at 5. Not quite right for that. So a little bit more editorializing than I would like to do on Hot News Live at 5 is required for talking about this. So we'll talk about it here. Now, this is from the Miami Herald. In national news, amid Puerto Rico debt woes, reality is hitting the San Juan streets. In San Juan, Puerto Rico, the signs of a struggling economy can now be seen in the shuttered restaurants and bars previously thriving in Old San Juan. In the faces of business owners who spend much of the day trying to coax customers through the doors, and statistics that show the island's population has plunged over the past decade. In the sense of indifference from people who can't afford to leave and have become used to a hard life. And Rosa Arias, again, this comes from the Miami Herald. Rosa Arias came out with a statement saying, "We're not going up or down, we're stuck." She's a 70-year-old, spunky 70-year-old, they note, who stopped earning an income 3 years ago as a babysitter when the parents of those children lost their own jobs. She said, "I managed to eat and sleep, but that's it. I live day to day." Arias' existence is part of the harsh reality outlined on Monday by Governor Alejandro Garcia Padilla, who said the U.S. territory cannot pay back the $72 billion in public debt and called on Puerto Ricans to share in making sacrifices. That's not something you want to hear when you're in a first world area, right? I mean, it's not something you want to hear at all. But we don't usually think of Puerto Rico as having problems. I mean, Greece, of course, is also a first world nation, but this hits closer to home than Greece does. Greece, the situation in Greece is something that we can sort of set aside and say, well, you know, that's a Eurozone problem. That doesn't really affect us. And you'd be sort of right, actually. It affects the world economy, yeah, but we're not really focused on that, are we? We're focused more on the local economy angle. Puerto Rico, however, is a U.S. protectorate. It's a U.S. territory anyway. And so anything that hits Puerto Rico economically kind of actually does affect us. So Puerto Rico's dilemma is sure to affect the international financial system, which is already wobbling from the economic turmoil in Greece. For many of Puerto Rico's 3.6 million residents, which is way fewer than I thought, who have been dealing with economic uncertainty for years, life is about to get much more expensive. A new sales tax of 11.5%, the highest compared to any U.S. state. Of course, again, Puerto Rico is not a state, it's a territory, a little bit different, takes effect on Wednesday. Puerto Rico also has the highest municipal bond debt per capita of any U.S. state. And again, it's not a state. Puerto Rico needs a restructuring plan, Garcia Padilla said in his televised address. "We must act now. I know it's not easy, but I also know that we have no alternative." The governor said that he will begin meeting with legislators and other leaders to discuss how best to resolve the financial crisis. He said he wants a debt repayment moratorium of several years in his address, and he said his administration would lobby Washington for the right to file for bankruptcy under Chapter 9. Now, again, this is not the first time we've seen either U.S. protectorate or territory or any sort of U.S.-held area go into bankruptcy. We've seen states go into bankruptcy before. Detroit, the city of Detroit went into bankruptcy. I believe New York City teetered close to that, but didn't quite come to it, I'm sure. So we're seeing different situations that have occurred similar to this one, but Puerto Rico petitioning to be able to file for Chapter 9 bankruptcy is something that is disturbing, to say the least. However, because Puerto Rico is not a state, but a U.S. territory, neither the island's government nor its public agencies can actually file for bankruptcy unless the law is amended. Now, on Monday, the White House urged U.S. legislators to consider changing the law. However, a federal bailout of Puerto Rico is not under consideration. I mean, how could we afford that, right? The governor's team has until August the 30th, which is not that long from now, to develop an economic and financial reform plan, which must be approved by the island's legislature. Jose Rodriguez Baez, the president of the Federation of Workers of Puerto Rico, said that he agreed the debt is not payable, but that measures must not further impoverish the island. And again, this is a situation that comes across or comes about possibly not even from the fault of your average Puerto Rican, right? When we hear about financial crises such as these, more often than not, in fact, I can't think of any situation where this is not the case, it's the fault of the government. It's not the people, right? Like, we're in national debt right now. Is that my fault? No. Is it your fault? No, of course not. What, did you rack up a whole bunch of debt? And did you rack up a whole bunch of foreign spending? No, of course not. That's not your fault. To an extent, it is kind of our fault in that we've been complacent in its happening. But if anything, we're just sort of accomplices. We're not full-on perpetrators when it comes to the national debt. So it's a lot of the times it's really not our fault. And again, it's not the Puerto Ricans' fault either. So we have a problem now with Puerto Rico, which is still a U.S. territory. But how longer? You know, for how much longer will Puerto Rico be a U.S. territory? I wonder. Will they decide to stay in Puerto Rico, or will they decide to separate? You know, cut ties and decide to start their own form of economy? Who knows? Well, Jose Rodriguez Baez is the president of the Federation of Workers, and he says that, or rather, he agreed that the debt is not payable. So you have a debt which is not payable. What do? Well, you can't just seize people's assets like they did in Cyprus. You definitely don't want another Cyprus in Puerto Rico. So what do? Well, of course, the option is a bailout from the United States, which would be debt to pay debt, which is not a viable option, not sustainable. So what do? Again, they would just put them in debt again, because then they would owe money to the feds. So that's not a very good option either. The situation for the working class is already very hard, Mr. Baez said, and a lot of our educated and able youth have fled because they have no recourse. Obviously, all the various sectors need to sit at the table to look for a viable solution. So if you ever thought that the economic situation overseas would never hit home, it's starting to. It really is. So do I say this all to make us very angry and upset and scared and, oh, we should all, grab our SKSs and start a commune in the woods? Well, no. And I do love the SKS, by the way. It's a wonderful weapon. But no, it's not like that. It's not Y2K or anything like that. Although the economic ramifications are probably going to be much worse than Y2K, because really not a whole lot happened on Y2K. What is going to happen, however, is we're going to be seeing economic hard times in the near future. The solution is actually something that has been talked about quite frequently here on Hot News Talk Radio, is local economy, because that is something that which can't go away. You can't get rid of local economy. You can't negate local economy because it's here to stay. If, say, just the city of Chattanooga decided, the folks in the city of Chattanooga decided, hey, who cares about national economy anyway? We have our own barter system. We don't need that. We don't need the stock market. Come on. This is a local business going on here. We don't need the whole national system. So we abdicate ourselves from the whole national process, and we decide, I should say, that we are a local entity, and thus will not take part in any sort of national economic dealings. And that would actually be a viable solution. But that's a little bit unlikely right now. In the near future, however, hey, anything could happen. So the idea is that keeping money in a bank is probably not a good idea, and keeping money that's not in a physical form is probably not a good idea. And I'm not saying this to berate anybody, because I'm equally guilty of keeping my money in a bank account as anybody else. Trust me, I have a checking account just like anybody else does. So I'm maybe a little bit hypocritical, but I am giving a little bit of advice that probably keeping your money in a bank may not be the best idea right now, if ever. I mean, who trusts the banking system anyway? Well, in an effort to save money, I've been looking at cars, right? I mean, I need a car. Pretty badly, actually. I used to drive, and hopefully will again, a Buick LeSabre, 1998 Buick LeSabre. Ooh boy, what a fun car! It's the stereotypical first car, right? And it actually was not my first car. My first car was it was a van. It was a 2000 or 2001, I think, Ford Windstar minivan. Oh, never again. So then I got I didn't get, my parents got a 1994 Nissan Pathfinder. And actually, that one's still up and running, funnily enough. That one, you can't break that one. The dang thing's a tank. Well, I have this American car. I'm not a fan of American cars anyway, which is the Buick LeSabre from 1998, which was a gift from my aunt. I can't argue with that, right? And it's actually it's a good car, except it kind of breaks a lot. And now I'm in a situation where it has broken down again. I have amateur advice, which may actually be expert advice. I'm not sure what his job is, but I have advice saying that it's probably a coil pack, whatever that is. So I need to get that fixed, which costs money. But so I was thinking, this Buick LeSabre is not going to last forever, right? Like my car is not going to last forever. It's not a Toyota, so it's not going to last forever. So what do I do? Well, I should probably start looking at buying a car, save up some money, and buy myself a car. But I don't have a whole lot of money, but I also want something that's kind of nice. So what do I do? I was researching inexpensive cars and actually came up with something that astonished me. Now, don't take this as a full-on endorsement, right? I'm not getting paid to say anything here. Trust me, I'm not getting paid to say anything here. But I thought this was kind of interesting and worth research, independent research on your own, because this is kind of a cool concept. It's called the Elio, and it's actually made here in the States. It has 3 wheels, and it reaches 84 miles to the gallon if the reports are to be believed. So in Las Vegas, with an expected price of just $6,800, yes, you heard that right, and a claimed 84 miles per gallon on the highway, the Elio seems kind of too good to be true. So I watched a video from Chris Fix, and if you haven't watched videos from Chris Fix, you should. He does a really good series of videos on sort of basic things on how to do maintenance on your car. Extremely useful things for me because I'm awful with cars. I can change my own oil, and that's about as far as it goes. I can change the tire, and I can change my own oil, and I can put radiator fluid in and windshield wiper fluid in, and I can drive a manual, and I'm very proud of that. But that's about as far as it goes with my car knowledge, which funnily enough might actually be higher than average, but I doubt it. So I can do those things, but when it comes to maintenance, like actual maintenance of a car, I'm pretty terrible. So his videos are a big help for me. Chris Fix on YouTube, definitely check him out. And no, I'm not getting paid to say that either. I'm actually a fan. So showcased at the 2015 International CES, that's the Consumer Electronics Show, by its creator, Paul Elio, that's E-L-I-O, this weird-looking orange vehicle takes a stripped-down approach to efficient transport. The American-made and engineered car is down one wheel and a lot of sheet metal compared with a conventional car, presenting itself as an inverted 3-wheeler. Now, when they say inverted, they mean it's not a tricycle. Imagine a tricycle turned backwards, along with the seat turned backwards and the handlebars on the other side, and you'd have it. What I'm saying is 2 wheels in front, 1 in back. There you go. Unlike most inverted trikes that the writer of the article has seen or driven, the Elio is actually a front-wheel drive vehicle, so the power does not go to the rear wheel, which is important. It's a 55 horsepower 3-cylinder engine, and it lives under the narrow hood and drives the front wheels, which are hidden beneath their own individually articulated aerodynamic shrouds. Really, you have to see it. 55 ponies may not sound like a lot. 55 horsepower doesn't sound like a whole lot, but the Elio only weighs 1,200 pounds, which means that I actually know a guy who could lift the thing. It's about half as much as a Mazda Miata. Actually, I seriously do know a bodybuilder who could probably lift that thing. Occupants sit in a tandem configuration, the driver ahead of one passenger, meaning tandem, just like a motorcycle. Imagine an enclosed motorcycle, and you got it. It's very narrow, and it's slipstreamed in design. From the driver's seat, the Elio is controlled with a conventional steering wheel and pedals. I mean, when you're steering it, it's like a regular car, really. The passengers are protected in the event of collision by 3 airbags, a steel roll cage, and seat belts. The Elio's also got anti-lock brakes, stability control, and crumple zones, just like a regular old car. It actually does have a stereo, AM/FM stereo, I should say. It's augmented by a tablet that's mounted in the rear steering wheel. The iPad runs a custom interface that is suited for use in the car and handles the navigation, infotainment, and telematics functionalities. Using a tablet makes the tech feel a bit tacked on, but it also makes it possible for Elio to offer the features its drivers may want quickly and without spending millions on infotainment R&D. So what they're saying is you actually kind of need a iPad, or I don't know if there's Android support yet either, but you'll need a tablet of some sort to get the infotainment stuff going, which is your rear-facing camera, anything else you might want in that regard. Elio Motors is currently accepting reservations for the $6,800 Elio on its website, Elio Motors. The automaker expects the vehicle to hit the roads in the U.S. in mid-2015, although that's actually been bumped up to mid-2016. So it's been bumped up a year. In the Chris Fix video, actually, he does a drive around it. I mean, he actually drives the thing, and it's funny because they had a 3-cylinder Geo Metro engine in it, which is just the funniest thing. But I mean, it looked like peppy. I mean, not like a sports car, but it actually kind of performed surprisingly well. And they are going to be engineering their own engine for it for the P5, the Elio P5. So I'm actually kind of interested in it to see how it goes. I was a little bit enamored with it. Me and my friend were discussing it. He's much more into cars than I am, and he gave it a cautious thumbs up. Although he gave me some advice that I thought I would pass on, which is it may be sort of like the iPhone, where the first generation is not really that good, and it's not really the whole idea fleshed out. However, 2-3 generations down the road, things will start to look pretty good. And I kind of concur with that. That the Elio might be actually really cool when it first comes out, or it might be like it's cool, but the idea isn't quite fleshed out yet. And yeah, well, that might be the case with the Elio. We'll have to wait till it comes out though to see all the reviews and to test drive it ourselves. So they're going to be opening up, I think, 120 locations across the 50 states in order for us to be able to buy one from a dealership and have it shipped and all that sort of thing. Now, the $6,800, by the way, does not include any sort of add-ons that you might give it. So the $6,800 is the basic model, but you can buy the $6,800 model, by the way. Like, they don't make you add any sort of trim level. So you can actually buy it for $6,800, not including shipping and all that sort of thing, dealer fees, whatever. So I'm actually kind of fascinated by this vehicle because it's not something that I would have thought of. And 84 MPGs, can't really argue with. And for $6,800, especially if they have a system of paying in installments, I mean, hey, how can you argue with that, really? So I'm pretty interested in seeing this vehicle for real sometime in the middle of next year. So very excited about that. 2 people have unfortunately passed away after a passenger self-immolated, which is set himself on fire. Japanese media now reporting that 2 people are feared dead after an apparent act of self-immolation on a bullet train. The news reports from Japan said that we have been informed that there was a passenger in a car on the train who covered him or herself with oil and then set it on fire. A man and woman are dead, and around 20 others are injured. And TBS has footage of passengers evacuating the smoke-filled carriage as well. That just came out a few seconds ago today. So I thought I would pass that along as well. So AC/DC has been sort of reclusive from the music streaming business. If you're looking into streaming AC/DC, you might have a bit of a hard time. Well, that might not be the case anymore because now AC/DC is actually going to be on several mobile platforms for streaming. For streaming, I should say. Pardon me. Allergies. So it's actually going to be on several mobile platforms, including RDO, Apple Music, and I think Google Play Radio as well. If you're into that sort of thing, because I'm actually kind of not. I'm not going to lie. And not a huge fan, actually, of AC/DC. I like 1 or 2 songs, but I don't think I could listen to a whole album. So, yeah, take from that what you will. But, yeah, if you want to listen to AC/DC streaming, you actually can. The European Union is now demanding that Google responds to antitrust complaints by August the 17th. Well, something to keep in mind, of course, is that Apple, or rather Google, pardon me, is an American company, founded here in the States, and they could, or rather it could potentially just pull out of the European Union anyway and just say, forget it, no more Google searches for you. Well, Google is in hot water, according to Extreme Tech, with the European Union. Allegedly, Google started manipulating search results in some European markets as early as January 2008, and the European Commission is, well, not happy about it, to say the least. Now, Google has until August the 17th to respond to the Commission's claims. Reports have surfaced that the original deadline was July the 7th, but an extension was granted to allow Google to properly review the issue at hand. And unless Google can pull out some seriously compelling arguments by the middle of August, it would be facing some non-trivial fines as well. Of course, all of this antitrust decision immediately brings back memories of Microsoft's antitrust debacles within the United States and the European Union, which did not end well for Microsoft, to say the least, in the 2000s, where Microsoft actually had to split into 2 divisions, one for software and, well, rather one for operating systems and one for supporting software for operating systems, which was a really stupid move, by the way. The Supreme Court decision made 0 sense whatsoever, and it was based on, I don't want to say lies, but miscommunication, misconception, perhaps, about how an operating system works. People got really mad that Microsoft bundled in a browser with Windows. No kidding. And they said it's unfair competition because you're not going to know to get Netscape. Worst argument I've ever heard, but somehow it made it through and Microsoft lost an antitrust lawsuit. That's government for you.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection: loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas. Every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Host News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Host News Talk 1240.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Lillian Wu. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie officially launches his 2016 campaign for president.
When I decided to make this announcement, there wasn't any choice. I had to come home, and Livingston is home for me.
Speaking to supporters in the gymnasium of his old high school in New Jersey, he becomes the 14th Republican to make a bid for the GOP nomination. At the upstate New York prison where 2 killers escaped, 3 members of the correctional facility's executive team placed on administrative leave. Meanwhile, surviving convict Richard Sweat said to be talking to authorities. Trish Begum with Fox News affiliate WXXA reports.
According to authorities, Sweat and fellow escapee Richard Matt split 5 days ago because Matt had become ill and he was slowing him down. Matt was shot and killed Friday. Sweat's mother spoke with reporters.
Fox News. We report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
The European Union and Google at odds with each other now, possibly in maybe the European Union trying to validate itself? I'm not sure, actually. The complaint is that Google is putting search results from Google services ahead of competitor services, which kind of makes sense, actually. You do have a choice in search engine, after all, right? Like, you can decide to not use Google. You can use Yahoo. You can use Bing, heaven help you. You can use and DuckDuckGo, which is actually a very good search engine. You can use any number of search engines. Well, not any number, but you can use a pretty good number of search engines in order to diversify your search engine portfolio. Put it that way. So it's not like you don't have any options when it comes to search engines. You can use Google, you can use DuckDuckGo, you can use anything you want, really. You're not stuck with Google as your main option. However, Google tends to be the best option when it comes to search engines. But the folks in the European Union are for some reason upset that Google is putting its own services ahead of other services. Not sure why. It's saying it's not fair. Well, the market is not fair. It's free, but it's not fair. Well, Google is now in hot water with the European Union. Again, Google is accused, I should say, of starting manipulating search results in some European markets as early as January 2008. And the European Commission is not very happy about it. Now, Google has until August the 17th to respond to the Commission's claims. Reports have surfaced that the original deadline was July the 7th, but an extension was granted to allow Google to properly review the issue at hand. And unless Google can pull out some seriously compelling arguments by the middle of August, it could be facing some non-trivial fines. Of course, all of this antitrust discussion immediately brings back memories of the Microsoft antitrust debacles in the 2000s between the US and the European Union and Microsoft. And however, the threats of fees, negative press, and added scrutiny will probably be enough to make the Mountain View company stay on the straight and narrow, or at least give the appearance of staying on the straight and narrow. A few days ago, a Yelp-backed study was released publicly, and it provides evidence that Google may actually be purposefully manipulating its search results to increase the reach of its own products. But again, why wouldn't you do that? Yelp seems to have an axe to grind with Google, but this study is just another log in the fire. Many people have been suspicious of Google's monopolistic tendencies for years now, so it's no surprise that the European Union is getting in on the fun. But again, you have to keep in mind that you don't go to Walmart and expect to not see great value products, right? You don't go to any of these other stores and expect to not see the house stuff, right? Like, you don't expect to go to a bar and have them not offer you their home brew or what have you. You don't really expect that. So it kind of doesn't make any sense that they're getting upset, rather it's getting upset at Google for doing what any business would do. I'm not sure what the complaint here is really, other than just it's not fair. But again, business is not fair. That's just how it is. If this ordeal bothers you as much as it does the writer of the article, then you're probably considering giving Google the boot. For search, you can give DuckDuckGo a try, of course, and beat the privacy drum pretty hard. DuckDuckGo does not keep records of its searches, according to the company. The European Union's Commission initial complaint was filed back in April of this year, and Joel Hruska, who's a writer for Extreme Tech, gave a breakdown on the issue. And we all know that it's only the first handful of results that really matter. So the idea that Google is pushing the competition below the fold is a little bit worrisome. And since Google has moved into the operating system and hardware space in the last decade, the potential for abuse is strong, sure. So the question is now, are you being manipulated by Google every time you use your Android phone? And the writer of the article says that he's a little bit scared that the answer might actually be yes. Google has plenty of smaller competitors in every product category, so maybe it's time to give them a go. You might just be surprised to find that you're better off without Google, regardless of the antitrust concerns. And you're free to make that choice, obviously. I mean, you can buy what you want. You can use whatever service you want. Personally, I'm really not too worried about Google. It doesn't seem like Google is really exhibiting monopolistic tendencies in a way that really bothers me. It seems more like it's just doing what businesses do. Really, when it gets to be that size, that's just kind of how it is. But the main complaint is that Google's promoting its own services ahead of competitor services, and that just kind of makes sense anyway. I mean, you do, again, have the option to not use Google. It's not like Google is the only option when it comes to even buying a smartphone. You can buy an iPhone. You can even use Firefox OS. There's different options out there. I'm actually more surprised that Apple hasn't been facing antitrust lawsuits for some of its tendencies, but, go figure. There's a boomerang-like aircraft that could be the first to fly on Mars. according to these reports. With its various rover missions, NASA has been actively exploring the red surface of Mars since the 1990s, but now the space agency wants to investigate the Martian skies. NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center is testing out a prototype, I wish they handed out, testing out a prototype of a flying wing aircraft called the Prandtl-M, which could be the first man-made vehicle to fly on Mars. And it looks like a large titanium boomerang. I would describe it more as a flying wing, but the Prandtl-M will be made of fiberglass or carbon fiber and has a wingspan of 24 inches when deployed. Yet its prototype is actually very lightweight at just under a pound. So since Mars has significantly less gravity than Earth, this means that the Martian version of the aircraft could weigh up to 2.6 pounds and still fly efficiently. The Martian atmosphere is also much thinner than it is on Earth, so NASA will be conducting some high-altitude tests on the Prandtl-M to see if it's fit to fly above our planetary neighbor. Later this year, a balloon will take the aircraft up to an altitude of 100,000 feet, where the air is much thinner, to simulate what it would be like to fly in Martian airspace. Future tests will take the Prandtl-M even higher to 450,000 feet. So if these flights prove successful, the idea is to pack a folded-up Prandtl-M inside a spacecraft that will carry the next rover on the red planet in the early 2020s, so about 5 years from now. Once the rover mission reaches Mars, the Prandtl-M will then deploy over the planet, glide over its atmosphere for 20 miles, and then land. NASA hopes to use this flight time to scope out possible landing sites for a future human mission to Mars. Unlike a boomerang, though, the Prandtl-M will not be coming back, but at least it will be in good company with all the other rovers which are on Mars. So very exciting stuff. I'm always really interested in space flight, space travel, space anything. It's always just something that's so interesting and fascinating to me. How interesting and fascinating, I know. It's something that's so just fascinating to me that we have objects in space. You know, there's objects that we made, or at least the folks in NASA made, that are actually on another planet. It's just such an odd thing to think about. It's such a cool thing that really you just don't. It's hard to comprehend even that there's just these objects out there in space that people here made. It's so strange to think about. If you use Google Maps for your main source of navigation now, you may be actually a little bit better off, because Google Maps is now going to start warning drivers when they're going to be approaching rail crossings. The federal transportation officials can't quite explain why the number of U.S. rail crossing accidents jumped by 9% last year, but they've recruited a powerful ally to keep that figure from climbing any higher, Google. According to the New York Times today, the Federal Railroad Administration plans to announce a new partnership with Google that will ensure drivers are alerted whenever they come up on a rail crossing. Google is using data from the Department of Transportation, the DOT, to identify every rail crossing in the United States and mark those locations in maps. Maps will now be able to provide audio and visual cues when you're in navigation mode and approach any crossing where collision might be possible. A good one I can think of is the one near Graysville Road. If you're heading into Brainerd, you're probably going to hit that one. There's a railroad crossing right there. There's another railroad crossing, same railroad actually, in Ringgold, that could cause some problems as well. So that could be useful, especially if they somehow have an alert system that lets you know when a train is coming. That would be helpful too. Actually, I would like a text alert just to know when trains are coming. I just like trains anyway. Trains are kind of cool. There's just something kind of neat about trains. They've been around for over 100 years, 150 years almost even. It's just something really cool about that. Maps will now be able to provide audio and visual cues, though, when you're within a railroad crossing area. Officials believe these tragedies are often due to driver inattention, so a simple notification will then draw your attention to your phone, so you then smack right into a train. Now, a simple notification from Google's popular Maps app may provide very helpful notification. The Federal Railroad Administration has also reached out to Apple, Garmin, MapQuest, and TomTom in hopes that they'll also agree to alert drivers about grade crossing. Now, I have a Garmin GPS that I use pretty frequently, actually, because I'm terrible with directions. And it would be kind of cool if it would alert me of railroad crossings, although we don't really have a huge problem with that here. There is an area north of here, I mean, in Tennessee, but a little bit north of us in Chattanooga, where there was just recently a very unfortunate fatality on a railroad track, I should say. So would that technology have prevented that from happening? I kind of doubt it, but it's needless to say, we do have railroad fatalities here in our area. So it could be useful. It might save lives, and hey, how can you argue with that? In France, they seem to not like Uber too much. Kind of annoying, actually. The aggression, I believe, is misguided, actually, when it comes to Uber in France. Right now, taxi unions are protesting, and French authorities have taken Uber executives into custody. So on Monday, French authorities took 2 Uber executives into custody for questioning as part of an investigation into UberPop, which is the startup's lower-cost alternative. Local media have named the men as Thibaut Simphal, the CEO for France, and Pierre-Dimitri Goricotti, I believe is how you say, the CEO for Western Europe. Under French law, both men can be held up to 48 hours without being charged, similar to U.S. law, where it's 24 hours without being charged. Our general managers for France and Western Europe today attended a hearing with the French police. Gareth Mead, an Uber spokesperson, told Ars Technica in a statement, "We're always happy to answer questions the authorities have about our service and look forward to resolving these issues. These discussions are ongoing. In the meantime, we're continuing to ensure the safety of our riders and drivers in France, given last week's disturbances." Uber has been in the public eye recently after 2 days of violent protests across France by taxi drivers and their unions. Last week, President François Hollande even declared the company operations to be dissolved, while Interior Minister Bernard Cazeneuve, I think, brought criminal charges against the ride-sharing company. The primary regulatory issue in France is that UberPop's drivers operate under a VTC license, or tourism vehicles with a driver. Created in 2009, this license was designed for pre-booked travel, not on-the-street hails. UberPop's drivers are like the UberX counterparts in the United States, normal people with regular cars who do not have an expensive French taxi license. As such, traditional taxi drivers in France have been upset that Uber seems to be flouting the law. Uber maintains that it is a technology company, not a traditional taxi company, and therefore the company believes that it's not bound by taxi law. So what did I mean when I said that the aggression is misguided on the side of the taxi unions? It's misguided because they're getting angry at the wrong party here. The person, or rather not person, but the entity they should be angry with is, of course, the French government for imposing these taxi restrictions with the taxi licenses. That's the problem, not Uber. They should not be getting mad at Uber for finding out a cool loophole that they could use. They should be getting upset, however, at the French government for restricting the taxi companies, because that's really what's happening here. There's a restriction of taxi companies, and there's also a restriction of the regular Joe, so to speak, who maybe wants to start a taxi startup, right? I mean, you can do that. You should be able to do that, I should say. You should be able to have a taxi startup with no problem. But for some reason, the taxi unions don't really like that because, again, competition is kind of not in the interest of unions and definitely not in the interest of a controlled economy. So that's kind of why we're seeing these protests. There's people who are afraid to either question the government or they're in favor of the government regulations because it would threaten their business if the regulations went away. That's not how you run a business. A business should not be propped up by the government regulation. A business should be propped up by its own good practices and its own relationship with its customers, not government regulation keeping there from being any competition. That's not a properly run business. That's, again, controlled economy, controlled capitalism, which is really not true capitalism, and it's definitely not a free market, which is unfortunately what we have in France. We're not quite there yet here. However, we are quickly on the way. Of course, the solution is to just stop government regulation, is to say we don't want government regulation and we don't want you to tell us what to do when it comes to our business dealings. Because really, what business is it of the government if there's a taxi company that doesn't have a chauffeur's license, right? I mean, so if there's a poor business practice, there will be customer complaints, there will be lawsuits filed, all sorts of PR nightmares. That seems like it's enough aside from government regulation. The problem is we have a monopoly that's totally separate from any sort of business monopoly. It's a monopoly in the sense that the government has monopoly on regulation, not self-regulation like we have with, say, the ISO, the International Organization of Standards. Not self-regulation like that. No, government-imposed regulation is what you need. That's what they're claiming. Security? Do you want a private security firm? No, you have to have cops. You have to have government surveillance as your main form of security. So there's a government security monopoly, and there's definitely a government regulatory monopoly. And anything that threatens that is a threat to national security and the American way and Superman and all that sort of thing. And that's what we have going on here, where people are not really willing to admit that, at least on a broader scale. And definitely people who are in unions are not wanting to point that out. They might say that I'm against unions. Yeah, However, I'm not necessarily against the idea of workers forming a union of their own consent. However, workers being forced to join a union is kind of a bad thing. And also, employers not being able to fire people for joining a union is also a problem. That's always sort of been my philosophy, is if I owned a business and my employees start talking about unionizing, I just fire them all. I should be able to do that. But unfortunately, that would cause quite a few problems in the current legal system. Unions are usually not in the best interests of business. I mean, it's not the Upton Sinclair 1910s anymore. They don't quite need unions anymore. But anyway, Supreme Court has ruled that the EPA must consider costs before regulating mercury emissions. The Supreme Court has ruled today that the Environmental Protection Agency cannot call for a cap on mercury emissions from power plant companies without considering the costs placed on the industry. In 2012, the EPA adopted the first ever regulations limiting the amounts of mercury and other toxic pollutants emitted by power plants. A major part of President Obama's environmental agenda, the changes were meant to curb a leading source of these harmful neurotoxins, which have a proven detrimental health effect on children and unborn babies. I'm actually impressed with the writers for The Verge for saying unborn babies and not fetuses or something along those lines. So props to you, The Verge. I guess it's unborn babies if it fits with the narrative. I'm not sure. But here's the problem with all this stuff is not really a problem, but something that I kind of noticed is, why is the president passing regulation and legislation now? I mean, why bother? If I were the president, honestly, and this isn't even a knock at Obama, honestly, if I were the president, I would just kick back and relax at this point. I'd say, well, you know what? I've done enough. I'm just going to kick back and relax and wait it out. And, you know, I'm the president, man. I'm the president of the United States. What are you going to do? So I'm just going to sit back, relax, and chill out in the Oval Office, you know, order some executive cocktails and just kick back and relax, man. And maybe call up some president from another country on my cool red phone. You know, that's what I would do if I were the president right now. I'd just kick back and relax. But for some odd reason, the president that we have today is actually wanting to get stuff done. While I don't disagree, or rather I don't agree necessarily with what the president is wanting to do, I guess props to the president for actually doing something. I don't know. However, the EPA estimated that the regulations wouldn't come cheap. The new guidelines require companies to install scrubbers that would take pollutants out of the air, a move that would cost the industry about $9.6 billion every year. The regulations started taking effect in April, but 21 states and industry groups challenged these changes, arguing that the EPA overstepped its authority when it approved such expensive emission limits. Yeah, no kidding. I would think, they say, it's classic arbitrary and capricious agency action for an agency to command something that is outrageously expensive and in which the expense vastly exceeds whatever public benefit can be achieved, said Justice Antonin Scalia. Due to this backlash, the Supreme Court has been debating a clause of the Clean Air Act that gives the EPA authority to limit emissions of air pollutants as long as the regulation is appropriate and necessary. The clause does not specify the costs to be considered, and the agency said that it only thought about the expense after the new standards had been decided. U.S. Solicitor General Donald B. Verrilli, Jr. defended the regulations in high court, arguing that it's certainly appropriate for the EPA to list power plants for regulation based solely on health and environmental hazards. However, if the regulations which they are passing would actually cause the industry to go out of business, well, that's kind of a problem in and of itself, isn't it? If it's regulation that would actually cause this industry to collapse, then it would be the government's fault, definitely at that point. Why are you even considering it? $9.6 billion every year is nothing to sneeze at, even for an energy company. I kind of doubt TVA could afford $9.6 billion every year. That seems like a bit of a stretch. So it's frustrating when you see situations like these where you just bury your hand in your heads, or your head in your hands, and you just say, man, you know, what's the government even doing at this point? All this regulation just doesn't make any sense. Why not just, like, you know, stop? You know, how about you just stop passing regulation, because it's not actually helping anything. Like, it seems like at this point we kind of have enough, right? Like, think about it. At this point, don't we kind of have enough regulation? Why are they still passing bills anyway? Like, would we actually see a huge detriment to our society if the guys in Congress, and ladies as well, decided to just sort of hang up their hats and go home for a month? Would we actually see that much detriment? I mean, think about it. Like when they when the government shut down that time, one of the many times, we didn't really see much changes, honestly. I mean, it's not like the Postal Service stopped working, and it's not like total anarchy reigned. It really didn't happen that way. Nothing really happened for us. And yeah, after they closed the public parks and that sort of thing, voluntarily, by the way, they ordered the public parks to be shut down, national parks, I should say, in order to make it look like there was an effect somehow. And different monuments were closed to the public to make it look like there was actually an event going on. But really, it didn't make that much of a difference. And honestly, if people really wanted to see the Jefferson Memorial, they probably could have just gone and seen it anyway, right? I mean, just jump over the barricade. If people in great numbers jumped over the barricades, there'd be no enforcing that anyway. I mean, it's public land anyway. How can you stop people from doing that? So it seems the government shutdown is actually kind of a good idea. Why are these people still passing regulations about just petty things that don't make any sense? Not to say the environment doesn't make any sense, but it seems like this regulation was a little bit misguided, seeing as it would cause an entire industry to go out of business potentially. Not something you really want to have to deal with. So what if the Congress just sort of hung up their hats and said, hey, you know what? We're going to sit back and relax for about a month. We're taking a vacation and no regulation for a month. Would actually anything happen? And I kind of doubt it. I seriously doubt much of anything negative would happen if every single member of Congress just decided, I'm not going to come in today for a whole month. You know, it doesn't seem like anything bad would actually happen. Even the president said, yeah, I'm not going to do anything for a month today. You know, for today, starting today, I'm not going to do anything for a month. I kind of doubt that anything bad would happen, really. It just seems like we would actually be better off if they just sort of decided to not do anything for a while. Well, there's a friendly reminder about leap years that we like to push, but this is a little bit different. Tonight's leap second may cause problems for the internet. Tonight at 23:59:59 on June the 30th, so actually tonight at 11:59, a leap second will be added to Coordinated Universal Time instead of the clock rolling around to 00:00:00 on July the 1st as per usual. Time will actually jump to 23:59:60, which shouldn't exist, before finally ending up in July a second later. The previous leap second, which was inserted in June 2012, caused a number of high-profile technological issues, and it's unlikely that the leap tonight will cause, or rather, it's likely that the leap tonight will cause some problems as well. So if you see problems with popular websites, that might be why, actually. Leap seconds are, of course, necessary because of the difference between civil time, i.e. everyday time systems that us pesky humans use, according to Ars Technica, and the actual mean solar day, i.e. how fast the Earth rotates. In UTC, which is what other time zones are based on, a day is defined as 86,400 SI seconds. So a differential could cause some problems technologically because websites tend to run on UTC. So we may even have problems here. We don't know, but if you notice a problem with your favorite website tonight, that might actually be why. So 11:59:59, you might see some problems. This is Hot News Talk Radio and Digital Drive right here, Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and 1190, or rather, at hotnewstalkradio.com.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing of the mob? Don't worry, just relax. You need a car. Come to Automax.
My wife and I keep the cost down. We sell a quality vehicle at a great price. Our overhead is low. I have no employees, so I can keep my costs down. In turn, the consumer gets a better price. Everything that I sell is emission ready. We really try to go the extra mile for our customer. I don't have to pay an employee commission. I don't have to pay somebody to come out here and wash my cars. You know, I do it all from buying to selling, from A to Z. I don't have the overhead where I have to raise the price on my vehicle to cover costs. Here at Automax, you're going to guarantee that you get credit. As long as you're making those payments, you're going to build on your credit. Unlike the buy here, pay here's where they don't report to credit bureaus, we report to all three credit bureaus. The subprime lenders that we deal with, you don't have to have any credit, or you can have bad credit. You can even have a bankruptcy, a repossession.
Don't worry, just relax. You need a car. Come to Automax.
Automax, across from Central High on Highway 58 in Harrison. Automax, 643-2886. That's 643-2886. Go to automaxchat.com. That's automaxchat.com.
Surgery does not have to be financially painful. Hi, I'm Surgical Dr. David Red, and I'd like to invite you to my walk-in surgery clinic in North Shore. Quick Surge brings you immediate relief from moles, skin tags,